Good evening. I want to thank everybody for tuning in and the people that will be tuning in later. We have the great Jon King on the show tonight. And you guys all know that I always bring candidates and information and issues on my show. And a young man definitely reached out to me. I'm going to give a shout out to David Bass. That was like, you definitely have to meet Jon King. And I was like, okay, great. so, so it's such an honor and for you to be here. You would like me to call you Secretary King? Or would you like to? which one would you like?
It's just a relaxed conversation, right?
It is. I don't know which one you want me to call you. Which one?
Jon is fine.
Okay, so it's how to be respectful. Let's call you Secretary King. How about that?
All right.
Okay, perfect. So, first, I guess I'm going to do this short bio because you have a long list. Your accolades pretty impressive, and so I have to say that that I would not be a good service if I did not share this this accolade. And you worked for former President Obama and was former secretary for the former President Obama for education. And you live in Silver Springs with your wife and your two daughters. How old are your daughters?
18 and 15.
18 and 15. So one's on her way out to college and one's in high school, correct?
So one just started. She's a college freshman, and then one is a high school sophomore.
Okay, what college does she attend?
She's at NYU. She's doing acting at NYU.
Yay!
She's having an amazing experience. We're very proud of her. It's a little scary and intimidating to send your baby off to the big city on her own, but she's having a good experience.
Okay, great. And so Montgomery County, you're our neighboring county to Frederick. That's interesting. We have a lot of educators that work in Montgomery County from Frederick.
Yeah.
Because we're underpaid over here. So we'll get into that later. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Secretary King, and let the audience know who you are. I know you visited Frederick not too long ago. Yeah. I'm sorry I was not able to make that event, but I'm trying to make up for it now. So tell me, please, about yourself and what inspired you to run for governor?
Sure. Well, look, what inspired me to run for governor was really the same values that inspired me to become a teacher in the first place. I really have a deep appreciation for the role that public institutions can play in people's lives because public schools saved my life as a kid. I always share with folks when I was growing up, both my parents were educators. My mom is a teacher and school counselor. My dad was a teacher and administrator, but they both passed away when I was little. My mom passed away when I was 8, October of 4th grade. And I lived with my dad. My dad was struggling with Alzheimer's. And so home was incredibly difficult. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what my father would be like from one night to the next. Some nights sad, some nights angry, some nights violent. And the thing that saved me was school. School was the one place in my life that was safe and consistent. And then my dad passed when I was 12. I moved around, different family members, different schools, struggled a lot, as often happens with teenagers who've experienced trauma, got in a lot of trouble. I actually always tell folks I'm the first United States Secretary of Education who have been kicked out of high school. But again, it was teachers and a school counselor who intervened in my life and helped me have more really hope about the future. And because of their intervention, I became a teacher and principal to try to do for other kids what teachers had done for me. And throughout my life as an educator, I've always been very conscious of all the other systems and the impact on kids and families, housing, transportation, food insecurity, whether or not folks have access to healthcare or can find good jobs. And so I really decided to run for governor because I believe that the next governor will be uniquely positioned to make government a force for good in people's lives in much the same way that schools were a force for good in my life.
Thank you for that. I definitely appreciate that. I work for the Baltimore Police Department, and we were just having a discussion with one of my partners, about kids going to school because that's where they get their only meal. That's where
Mhm.
their outlet is. And you just explained that. Like, your school education was your outlet. Like, the school system
Mhm.
and educational institutions were your outlet. And so I don't think we appreciate how important or acknowledge how important educators are. And so I'm glad that you acknowledge that. And I'm glad that you went back and paid it forward and became a teacher and enriched young lives and such. So since we're on education, COVID-19 has been a huge issue in the education system, and all the way from educational board members, the board members of education, to teachers have felt the strain on about that. How do you feel about what's going on right now globally in the education system when it comes to COVID-19?
Yeah. Well, look, I'm glad that kids are back in school. Um, for my daughter, who's a sophomore, she's so happy to be back with peers and at school. They're wearing masks. Kids are vaccinated. That's important. We need to keep that going now that the vaccine is available for the younger students. We got to make sure that they get vaccinated. So we got to make sure school is safely open. That's critical. But then there's a lot of work to do to make up for all the disruptions of the last year and a half. There's the academic consequences, unfinished learning, probably at least 6 months, maybe more, of unfinished learning, particularly for low-income students, students of color. But more than that, there's just the socio-emotional impact of being isolated from friends, from extracurricular activities, from relationships with teachers. Kids who are in families where somebody lost a job, lost a home, maybe they've lost loved ones. So there's a lot of socio-emotional support that's needed. We should be doing much more around access to school counselors and mental health services and support to help kids be in a socio-emotionally healthy place. So there's a lot of work to do. One of the things I've called for is mobilizing a statewide tutoring corps, trying to get young adults who are recent college graduates, retired teachers, mobilized as tutors, both to help students address their academic needs from this period, but also to create those kind of mentoring, positive relationships that can help kids' socio-emotional well-being. So we got our work cut out for us, and this won't be over in 6 months. I mean, even if as we move beyond COVID itself, making up for the last year and a half, that's going to be a multi-year process.
I agree. I think you have your work cut out for you. I know my daughter; she's in elementary, and she's in fourth grade. And I just had a conversation with the principal last week about how they're having issues on the recess, like, because the social skills are lacking now because they've been so inside for a whole year and away from their friends and away from a more structured environment of education system, and the educational structure of a classroom, that when they go out in the recesses, it's like all this like building up. So I agree with you that we definitely need to address the mental stability of our kids. A lot of kids have definitely experienced drug use of their families, domestic violence. So those are things that we have to address. So I commend you on that and acknowledging that. So I read your platform and I'm impressed of the things that you talk about, because those are things that I was like, wait, I didn't even think of that. Like, it was very impressive. And so the childcare industry is huge. It's a business that is underpaid, and we pay too much for some reason, but it's still underpaid, right? So it's like, and but the parents are still paying a lot of money to do childcare, and especially with COVID and parents being struggling for money. Universal childcare I call it hashtags. So I might be wrong for that, but we have lots of hashtags out there that can be diluted to what is really important. How do you feel about universal child care? And do you support the Build Back Better Act? And what's your plan to leverage the ability of Marylanders to afford child care while at the same time increasing the income for child care providers?
Yeah. Look, I think in the wealthiest state, in the wealthiest country that has ever existed on the face of the earth, we can afford to take care of our babies. And so for me, we have to get to universal affordable child care birth through 5. And no family should have to spend more than 7% of their income on child care. Now, we've proposed a path to achieve that on our own as Maryland. Now, I hope the Build Back Better Act passes, and I hope it includes a real commitment to resources for childcare that we can then leverage in Maryland to help us get to universal access more quickly. But we've got to get there. And one of the things I'm struck by, even when I'm in more conservative parts of the state, small business owners will tell you they are losing people from the workforce, because, especially women, because they can't find affordable childcare. So this is not a Democratic issue or a Republican issue, an independent. This is an everybody issue. When we do that, when we get to that universal childcare, we've got to make sure that the reimbursement rate is high enough so that people can pay the educators well. In this country, many childcare educators are reliant on social services. They're reliant on public benefits programs because they don't make enough in their jobs. Well, given what we know about brain development and how crucial those early learning years are, we should be paying people like the teachers they are. And so we've really got to raise that reimbursement rate. A lot of childcare providers are small businesses owned by women, disproportionate women of color. We got to make sure that they're able to thrive. And so the level of investment matters a lot. We can't do universal child care inadequately. We have to make sure that there's high quality, affordable child care. But that's achievable. It's just a question of political will. And for me as governor, that's going to be a top priority. And I campaign on it. I talk about it everywhere I go in the state, because I want to make sure we have a mandate to get it done.
And yeah, I think a lot of people, I agree, a lot of people can, across the board, Democrat, Republican, it doesn't matter the income spectrum, that they definitely, childcare is expensive. Even the low income families that are getting vouchers, they still have to pay out of pocket like something, and it's still hurting them to pay that $50 or $30. So we have to find a solution, and I hope that you will bring that to the table of finding a solution for that. So the blueprint is huge. I definitely support the blueprint. Me as a candidate supports the blueprint and how. Oops. I do apologize about that.
No worries.
I
have a dog too, so I know what that's like.
I have a 17-year-old son that just came home from football practice.
I got you.
So I do apologize. So the blueprint is something I support, and it's been a huge topic because it's been pushed. It's been brought forward and then shut down, brought forward and then shut down. And then it's like, how are you going to get the money for it? Everybody's got to come up with the money for it. You got to come up with your own money. So do you support the blueprint, and why? And what is your plan besides telling officials to bring up their own budget?
Look, I love the blueprint. I was very involved through the civil rights organization that I run, the Education Trust, in a coalition of civil rights organizations, NAACP, Urban League, CASA, others, fighting for the blueprint. I think it's the right direction. It's going to help us raise teacher pay. It's going to help get more resources to our highest need schools in the state. It's going to make all of our high poverty schools, community schools with wraparound services. It's going to invest more in career and technical education. There's so many good things in the blueprint. We do have to pay for it. The good news is, because we've had good revenue on the tax side over the last years, because we have the additional federal money through the American Rescue Plan and more to come, hopefully, with Build Back Better, we should be in a position where the blueprint is largely paid for, at least through 2025, 2026. Now, in the long run, we may need more revenue to keep making the investment that's necessary. And I believe we ought to have progressive tax reform in the state. We ought to ask the people who are making more than $1 million a year to pay at least as much as a percentage of their income as middle income folks. We ought to make sure that large corporations are paying at least as much as small businesses, right, as a matter of tax fairness. And that will make sure that we have the revenue that we need. And I will say, when you look at the Democratic field, not all the candidates are blueprint supporters. Peter Franchot, the state comptroller, he opposed the blueprint. And, I think that was the wrong position. I think that was short-sighted. And I worry about whether he would follow through. And certainly on the Republican side, Governor Hogan vetoed the blueprint. So if we end up with a Republican governor, I think it's very unlikely the money actually will be there for the blueprint. So this is an issue that separates the candidates. And I hope folks will see that my commitment is very deep to making sure that we implement the blueprint with fidelity, that educators and parents are part of the conversation every step of the way on implementation, and that we do all we can for our kids.
I totally agree. I think this is going to draw the line in sand about who you're going to support, who you're not going to support, because like you said, a lot of candidates don't support the blueprint. But we also know this blueprint is going to focus on marginalized communities and build a strong workforce and create diversity. I know Frederick is something that we're still working on that. I know I talked with Chief of Staff Delegate Solman's Chief of Staff today, and he's from Montgomery County also. And I let him, we were talking about how Montgomery County residents are moving to Frederick County, and they want diversity, right? Because Frederick was lacking diversity for so long, and now we are trying to speed up the process and support that. How do you address this issue in making sure that, one, we create diversity based on this blueprint, we have a competitive salary workforce, and at the same time, because I know we are losing a lot of educators, and I have to say that my son has never had a Black teacher, and my daughter has never had a Black teacher. The only Black teacher that he's had was in sports. So it's kind of like, how are we going to create this diversity? And some of the Black educators are moved to like Urbana, and where there's not a large group of minorities, or the Latinx community are lacking bilingual educators, but at the same time making sure they get paid enough and want to stay. How are you going to address this issue?
That's right. Well, the good news is the blueprint includes a real commitment to raising teacher salaries. I propose that we should get as quickly as possible to starting salaries of at least $60,000. We want to make sure that we're able to attract the best teachers in Maryland. And if we attract the best teachers, that means diverse teachers. And we've got to be intentional about the supply of diverse educators. Nationally, majority of kids in the nation's public schools are kids of color, but only 18% of our teachers are teachers of color. We do a little bit better in Maryland. We're more like 25%, but we have a long way to go to make sure that we have the diverse teacher workforce that we need. So a couple of things we should do. One, we should make much more investment in our community colleges and our HBCUs as pipelines of potential teachers. including loan forgiveness programs and scholarship programs that say to young people, if you will come and teach, particularly in a high need area, we need more bilingual teachers, we need more STEM teachers, we need more teachers who are willing to go to high needs rural and urban communities. If you're willing to do that, we're going to make it possible for us to cover the cost of your higher education, or certainly reduce greatly the cost of your higher education. That would help. The second thing we need to do is we have all this untapped potential in school districts, paraprofessionals, coaches, behavioral specialists, people working in after-school programs and summer programs who could be potential teachers, but they need more credits. They need programs that will be a bridge to getting their teacher certification. We should really make much more investment there so that we make sure that we have diverse teachers. And I would say to folks, this is important for kids of color. Black and Latino students need to see folks who look like them in classrooms and in school leadership. I think it's important for white kids too. I have a friend who says it's a little bit harder to be racist if you learn calculus from a Black teacher, right? There's something really powerful about white kids seeing diverse adults in their school community who care about them and who are advancing their education. So this is a priority for me. And, in our education plan, we really emphasize the importance of educator diversity.
And I'm glad you made that example, because I know in Frederick we have a huge issue with the racial issues in sports and things like that. And like you said, if they've seen educators that were more diverse, they could be like, okay, we can have some more better respect for people of the minorities and Black and brown communities, because they are teachers. They're educating us. They're making us smarter. So I think it's a win-win for everybody. And you brought up the point about community colleges. That is so important. I sit on the Education Commissions Committee for the mayor's office in Frederick, and one of my passions and focuses for higher education and making our community college grow and be to have a retention rate, because a lot of the kids drop out because it's just not diverse. The programs are there could be better programs, and like you said, if we embrace all that, more money can come in.
That's right.
And I'm from Miami, Florida, and I've seen how a small community college can grow into Miami-Dade, where it's now a university. So it's like they have university classes. It just amazes me how when I went there, it was just a community college, but then it became bigger and bigger and bigger. The campus became huge. They got different campuses, and I'm pretty sure you've seen Miami-Dade Community College, and it's a great school, and it's something to be proud of, because they get a lot of people out of there that become educators because they have such great programs. And climate change. That's a huge topic. That is a topic in the young population and the older population globally. I've been watching the news, and they've been doing, I think it's ABC News, how they're going to different countries because of climate change and how it's affecting the world. And I don't think some people don't even think that big, right? It's like, oh, it's just affecting our community, but our community is affecting globally. You had brought up, when I read some things about you brought up the electric school buses. Mm-hmm. And so that is pretty cool to me. And so because our school buses are polluting the air in every way, and we need an upgrade in a huge way. What is your plan to address climate change, and tell us a little bit about the V2 technology and the school buses that you're talking about?
Yeah.
The VTG, is it V2G? Is that what it is?
Yeah. So the climate change issue is one of those issues where now everybody says the words climate change, but they're actually not committed to doing the things that are necessary to tackle it. So we've been very specific about our plan for climate action. And actually, we're doing a town hall tomorrow night to talk about our climate action plan. We, I believe, in Maryland have an opportunity to be a real national leader here, to be one of the first states to be net zero greenhouse gas emissions. But to get there, we need real policy change in a number of areas. One, we got to change how we think about our buildings. Certainly all of our public buildings should be using renewable energy. All of our schools should be using renewable energy. We ought to make it so that new construction, wherever possible, is using renewable energy, solar, geothermal, electric stoves rather than gas stoves. We got to make sure that we help homeowners and business owners retrofit existing buildings to renewable, but we got to move very quickly towards renewable energy in our buildings. Transportation, school buses, public transit buses, all of the state vehicle fleet, we got to move those to electric very quickly. Then we've got to move cars over to electric. But if we want people to drive electric cars, we got to build more charging stations. Fortunately, there's going to be some additional federal money there, but we got to build enough charging stations so that we can move to all electric cars. California and New York have committed to a date certain after which you will not be able to buy new combustible engine cars. That's the future. We have to make sure that we have the infrastructure to support electric cars. We got to invest a lot more in public transit. We got to have the MARC train extend further west. We got to have more MARC trains. We got to build the Red Line in Baltimore City. We got to build the Southern Maryland Light Rail project to lower traffic in Southern Maryland. There's a lot we can do to make sure that trains and buses are a part of our transportation strategy, reducing our fossil fuel usage. And then we've got to really accelerate the growth of the renewable energy sector. There are a lot of good jobs that could be created in Frederick County and throughout Maryland. Jobs in solar, jobs in wind, jobs in geothermal, jobs in weatherization. So we shouldn't see it as doing something about climate is going to be bad for the economy. Actually, it's key to our long-term economic development. Councilmember Hagan from Frederick County actually endorsed me and also endorsed our climate action plan because he's someone who's very focused on the need for us to think big on how we're going to approach climate. And he's also been disappointed that so many of our current elected officials have been moving so slowly on climate issues.
I agree with you on that, Kai Hagan. He's a great guy, Councilman Kai Hagan. Yeah, and I agree. He is a environmentalist. Like I can't catch up. I'm gonna be honest. I can't catch up. But I know, like, I am a big, huge supporter of community gardens, composting, and things like that. But I would have to say I watched the news a lot, and they were talking about. He was asking people questions about if you could afford an electric car, would you buy one? Mm-hmm. A lot of people say, let's get electric cars, but a lot of people can't afford electric cars. So how, I know that's a personal issue, but how can we encourage you to buy electric cars and make it affordable for, because I can't buy a Tesla.
Well, hopefully, this is one of the questions for the Build Back Better Act. Will there be included enough incentives to help people move to electric cars and also solar panels on their house, right? That's an expense too. Now, over the long run, the electric car saves you money on gas. Over the long run, the solar panels save you money on energy costs in your home. But that upfront investment, we have to help. Hopefully there'll be federal incentives, certainly at the state level. We need to have incentives that make it easier for people to make that shift over to renewable energy.
Yes, and I had just Carlia Summers on my show, and she was talking about the solar panels, and I definitely made a suggestion about solar panels being on, housing authority homes, things that are, so if we can do that, because that is government regulated. So it's like, let's put some solar panels on those houses and those apartments because it's government regulated. It's not coming out of their pockets, the owner's pockets, and then work from there, because I think that's doable, you know what I mean? And we do need more charging stations. And I have to say, I commute to Baltimore for 6 years now, and the MARC train is so important. We need, and a lot of the people that live in Frederick don't work in Frederick. They work outside of Frederick. So transportation is huge in Frederick. So I think a lot of the Frederick residents would be very happy if you were to find a way to use that infrastructure to bring the transportation and grow it. So So another thing that's really a big topic is abortion. Texas definitely rather some feathers in people. And what's your stance on abortion, and how do you feel about that in mental health?
Yeah. Well, look, abortion is healthcare, and we have to make sure that we protect reproductive freedom in Maryland. And given where the Supreme Court is headed, it may be that in many cases, folks are going to come from other states to Maryland because we're going to be the ones who protect the right to an abortion. We've got to make sure that abortion services are available throughout the state. If you look across the country, many of the doctors who perform abortions are older. Many of the clinics are struggling financially. So we've got to make sure that we're making the investment so that there is real access to abortion services in every part of the state. And your point about mental health services, that's a desperate need. And one of the things I hear everywhere I go in this state is the challenge that folks have finding mental health service providers, finding addiction treatment providers, finding recovery beds. We really should be doing much more as a state to incentivize mental health professionals to locate in some of the areas where we have shortages now. And we should be putting much more investment into addiction treatment rather than doubling down on incarceration. Too often in this country, we respond to crises with incarceration. Addiction, incarceration. Trauma, incarceration. Lack of education, incarceration. Instead of thinking about, well, we actually might be able to help people thrive on their own if we help them get proper addiction treatment, mental health services, job training, before they end up in the criminal justice system.
Yeah, and I agree with you on both. I have to say the abortion clinics definitely need more funding. I made a visit to an abortion clinic. I am in support of abortions and in a pro-choice, and so and when I went to the location, I was amazed of how things could have been better if they had more funding. The women could have felt more comfortable in that environment if it was more funding. And they're doing the best they can with what they have. And then what the interesting thing was that I went to one building thinking it was the clinic, and it was a clinic that would like hold you hostage and try to stop you from having abortions. So it's very strategically placed where you think, oh, I'm going to the right spot, and then it's not the right spot. And so that was very interesting to me. And I was like, this should not be happening. Like this, we have to do something about this for it not to be in our state of Maryland, especially if people are coming from other states and might come from other states to get this could be bad for us in the long run. So I hope that political officials and whoever gets elected thinks about this, like how this could hinder the process and make people very uncomfortable. Mental health you're right. Mental health definitely should be looked at. I work in the field that I work with. I work with incarcerated, returning citizens, and it's the systemic structure of our systems that have supported this, this revolving door. Instead of applying wraparound services, we feel like you said, lock them up, lock them up, lock them up when they are struggling from trauma, PTSD. And so we need that funding in places to help them with that. So I thank you for that. Now, the 2022 elections are going to be huge across. We have a lot of minorities putting their name on, and I am excited across the board of people that I've met that are putting their name in the hat to run for office, or state to local to, all levels. But I really think that the young voices are way louder than people are giving credit to. And I think they are like not paying attention to how loud those voices are globally. How do you, Atlanta was really good about rallying up young voters. How do you plan to do that in Maryland? Because they are next generations. They are our generation right now. I don't want to even say next because they are right now. How do you plan to rally up those voters and get them out to vote and get them involved?
Yeah. I mean, this is hugely important for me as an educator, right? Because I've spent my life emphasizing the importance of civic engagement for young people. So we're very fortunate in our campaign. We've got a lot of young people involved. We've got a paid internship program. We've got a lot of high school students and college students who are volunteering with the campaign. And I think it's crucial that we nominate a Democratic candidate for governor who inspires young people to get engaged. Climate, as you mentioned, huge issue for young people. Reimagining public safety. Police accountability, yes, but really reimagining public safety and getting to a place where we aren't just talking about Black Lives Matter, but we are building policies that reflect that Black Lives Matter. That matters a lot to young people. When I think about what my daughters are focused on, we were together in the protests last summer. They are very focused on climate. They're very worried about guns and our country's unwillingness to take action on guns. They were both involved in protests around March for Our Lives. So taking on those issues that young people are passionate about and giving them a path to have a seat at the table. Their involvement can't just be, make sure you show up to vote. It has to be, come help us figure out how we're going to solve these problems. On climate, one of the things I've worked on is this National Commission on mobilizing the K-12 sector to tackle climate. And one of the things I've been struck by is that in community after community, it's young people that are getting school boards to change their policies. It's young people who are showing up and saying, we've got to move to electric buses. We're building a new school building. It's got to be a net zero building. But we need more education on climate change in our science classes and throughout our K-12 education. And so we've really got to see this campaign as an opportunity, not just to mobilize, but to really empower young people and have their voices leading the way.
And I definitely thank you for that. I put Mr. Zach put some things up. I'm sorry, Zach. I'm gonna throw he's on it. So I'm gonna throw some things up there while we talk a little bit. I agree. I mentioned, you said you have two beautiful daughters. One's just went to college and one in high school. And I have a 23-year-old and a 17-year-old and a 9-year-old. And so I have them all in different spectrums. So I hear them talking about topics. We talk about those topics in our home. And so they're more vocal than the older population about climate change, about gun laws, about maternal health, about the Black Lives Matter, about Asian lives matter, Muslim lives. They have all these lives that matter, and they're very vocal about it. Gay rights, and the list goes on and on and on. And like you said, they don't want you to come to them and go, "Oh, I need your vote." They want to be like, "Where do you want to get involved?" So that's what we have to do. We have to embrace our young population and asking them where they want to get involved. And I thank you for that. And I agree. You being an educator would definitely rally up our young voters across the Maryland state. And that's important. That's really important. How does your family feel about you running for governor?
Well, to be honest, my daughter who's in college, she's supportive, but she's focused on, her college life for sure. My 10th grader has gotten involved in the campaign. She's come and volunteered in the campaign office. She's joined us for events, and my wife has been helping with events, and she's excited about it. We're a few years away from an empty nest, and so this is our next family project.
Yay! I'm pretty sure they're very proud of you, and happy for what you're doing. And hopefully when you come back to Frederick, I get to see you in person.
Absolutely.
Screen. And so what do you want to tell your voters, to tell the constituents and people out there that's going to vote for you, and or you want them to vote for you? What's your message that you have today?
Yeah. Well, look, it really is this idea that government can be a force for good in people's lives, that investing in education, economic development that is broad-based, that helps communities that have historically been left behind participate in our economy, that taking action on climate, all of those things are possible, but we have to do them together. And no single candidate can get all those things done. It's really about building a movement. And so I want people to check us out at jonkingforgovernor.com. I want them to sign up to volunteer and contribute and be a part of the campaign, but really to be a part of a movement that helps us elect candidates everywhere in the state who are committed to progressive change. And we can do that in Maryland. We can deliver on paid family leave. We can deliver on affordable child care. But it will take all of us working together.
Yes, I agree with that. So hopefully all of us are working together in some form or fashion. I mean, I've had some great candidates on my show that are in different areas and, running for different seats. And I have a feeling that if all of us get together and work together, we're going to do great things in Maryland. And Secretary Jon, I am so honored that you took the time out to be on my show, and honored that you are doing what you're doing, and that you paved the way for a lot of minority men, and I think that's a good look. And we definitely need a facelift in Maryland.
Thank you so much for having me on. Thanks for what you're doing to create the community conversation about how we make our communities stronger and healthier. And that's democracy in action. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, and I have a feeling that a lot of people are going to tune in. We have a lot of meetings on Tuesday nights, so I think a lot of people are definitely going to tune in later because they've been looking forward to seeing this. So I congratulate you for just putting your name on there, and good luck. Good luck. I'm pretty sure we'll see each other again.
Absolutely.
Have a great night. Thank you.
Good night. Take care.